Hello everyone. My name is Karima Salisu, also known as Bibliophile on Instagram. And with me here is the beautiful Chio, author of Memory of Stone series. And you're all welcome to the book reading and signing of the Memory of Stone series. So I hope you're all excited. Okay, so I hope you all have your copies here already, or you've gotten one so that you can sign it for it today. So, how are you today?
I'm fine. I'm really excited to be here, really excited for this event finally. I've been looking forward to this particular book reading and signing, so I'm happy we're about to start it.
Yeah. So, let's start with this beauty of a book. How did you come up with the idea? What inspired you?
Okay, so the idea to write this series started as a very long journey. I got inspired to go into fantasy writing after years of not being interested in reading or writing anymore. I found a particular book in fantasy which wasn't a genre I used to read, and it just felt like home to me. It felt like what I knew that I would enjoy. But I still figured maybe when I'm 50 or 60, I'll finally write a real book I want to publish. And then I started having dreams and dreams and dreams of the character Nix. She just kept coming to me, her life, the suffering, the good times, the bad, her whole character. And I just knew I had to create a story around this person. So that's where the idea of Memory of Stone came from, a dream.
You dreamt about Memory of Stone?
I dreamt about the character Nix.
Nix?
Yes.
I think I need to hire someone to send me dreams now. So can you give us a little synopsis about the series?
Okay, so the Memory of Stone series follows the character Nix, and we have a second protagonist known as Lawrence Blade. This is a kind of parallel life journey, fantasy story journey about Nix's journey through being a criminal to having her whole world changed, to having to save someone and every negative thing that happens about it. So throughout the journey, we get to see how she overcomes adversity, how she understands that the world that she thought, this small world that she thought was the only world she had, is so much bigger than that. That's basically the idea of Memory of Stone. And lots of fighting scenes.
Yes, I can testify to that. So, it's a fantasy book, a fantasy series.
Yes.
Were you scared of publishing a fantasy book in Nigeria? You know, most fantasy authors that are from Nigeria are based abroad. Like, were you scared about publishing a book that is fantasy, like that genre in Nigeria?
I wasn't actually scared, but there's two sides to how I felt about it. I became aware very early about how people will not react positively to seeing fantasy here. There's the aspect of superstition. There's the lack of acceptance of anything that has to do with magic. It's evil innately. Then there's the problem of the type of fantasy I chose to write. It wasn't steeped in Africa, Nigeria, or my culture. It wasn't steeped in Igbo mythology. So when I started talking about writing the book before I even was ready to publish, there was a lot of backlash from people I just met questioning me like, why would you want to write this? And I started realizing at that point that, okay, I'll have to defend this every time I talk about it. But when I went into writing properly, writing the story, understanding the publishing journey, I just knew that if I let this be something I concentrated on, I will never get this book out there. So I accepted that, knowing that there were other people, and I started finding other people who read fantasy but didn't talk about it. Maybe on Goodreads you see groups of Nigerian readers, fantasy readers that are empty, but there are still people out there on Goodreads, Twitter, Instagram that read fantasy but they didn't talk about it. When I started talking about my journey in writing, people started talking to me about it, and I knew there were other people out there who wanted these stories and they just didn't feel like they could talk about it. So it gave me the motivation and took away the fears of writing and publishing a fantasy series.
Okay, so as we all know, like you said, it's not based in Nigeria, not inspired by African myth or thereabout. How did you come about building this world, like the Alferia, Elson? beautiful walls.
Thank you. I have an overactive imagination, and I'm grateful for that because I'm happy I found my place in writing. If not, I'll just have an imagination that is going nowhere for me. So how do I explain it? I feel senses, like things I'm smelling, things I'm seeing. So when I started writing at first about where Nix was, the buttons, my concentration was not just what the place looks like, it's how she felt in the place. So I talk about the smells, talk about the character of people, talk about how things are sold there, and it kind of developed what the scenery would be. Honestly, in fact, I thought I was bad at writing description of places. My own idea was concentrating on the characters and their emotion, but I found that by expressing how they felt about these places, the scenery was easier to develop. So it wasn't based on any place. I just feel the only kind of research I did for describing the places was, let's say I want a place to be colorful and smell nice. I would think, what kind of flowers look like this? And those are the things I would include. And something for the names is just throwing a bunch of random letters together and hoping it works.
So that was,
it's a process. It's a process. You have to embrace the process. It worked out, so I'm happy for that.
All right. I know you have 2 books out now, so you guys, there are 2 books out already, so you can, binge on it. So how did you come about the name of Verity of Old? I know Memory of Stone has this past.
Yes.
Yeah. So how did you come about the name Verity of Old?
So the original title, first from, this is like, I don't want to go back to the past in that essence, but Memory of Stone wasn't the first working title I had before I published the book. But in the process of figuring out what I wanted to title the book, I knew I wanted to focus on, if you've read the first book, there's a hint of why the name is what the name is. I wanted it to focus on the little elements that you didn't think was important. So there's something to do with memory, something to do with the stone. So when I was naming the second book, it just felt that I should go the same path to name the second book in the series. So Verity means truth, and Old just is a reflection of your past or the past. So that's what the title is, the truth of the past, how the events of the past in the world, the past in the characters' lives influence the current situation they're going through. So that's how I chose name. So saying verity sounds better than saying truth. So
okay. Personally, I love multiple POVs, dual POVs. Am I the only one? No. Okay. So were you confused when writing different characters' POVs? Like you're writing Nix, do you get mixed up with Egan's POV?
Luckily, I didn't. I was surprised. I thought, I've never done it before, so I honestly thought I won't be able to differentiate the characters, or I'll make them too similar that it just feel like I'm writing one flat character. But before I wrote the book, like I said, I focused more on who these people were. I took my time to create a story around them. Parts that is not included in the book. It's just to give a feel of what their personality is, the journey they have to go through, and how they handle situations. So when I was writing these 2 characters, it was easy for me to differentiate them because now I saw them as individuals, not just the story I was writing.
What about the side characters?
Luckily, the side characters don't have a lot of points of views for their own story, but still I took interest in writing about the side characters the same way I wrote about the main characters, getting to know them first before I put them in.
Alright. Can you tell us about your favorite chapter or scene?
Okay,
Or do you want to read that for us?
Which book?
Verity of Old.
Okay, I can read from Verity of Old. I have different chapters that I really enjoyed writing, although I like the book in general. I have particular chapters that I specifically enjoyed.
Okay.
So I was thinking about it today because I know I've done this review before chapters, and I only just pick a random one that I like but don't really think that hard on it. But I want to read from In Verity of Old, don't worry, it's a spoiler-free area. Chapter 9, that's page 65. but I will start from page 68.
Happy.
I
I also love to say
Good
the
job.
habit.
Okay, so I will start from page 68 and just finish the rest of that chapter. Ganon flew with determination and resolve. He welcomed the wind in his hair and on his skin as it cooled him and calmed him, and he enjoyed his view as the city passed through his vision in small specks. Clouds wrapped around roofs like soft blankets, and they drifted and parted, revealing gardens, cobbled roads, and life. Zephyr was right here, and there was no point turning back now. He had gone straight to the meeting room once he was done with the council, avoiding the pool of the city. He needed time, he needed things to move as smoothly as possible if he was to ensure that they would stop without resorting to war. The declaration of war was just a threat to keep Holden on his guards and prevent him from recklessly moving forward. He had turned all eyes to him to prevent Holden from doing as he pleased. Now every territory would be watching Holden too to see how he responded. That bought Ganon some time to prepare. Now he had passed on his plans to the others. There was just one thing left for him to do, something he could not avoid any longer before he played his part. Ganon stood in the middle of the street in simple clothes. He hadn't asked any of the others to follow him or his guards to prepare a parade for him. It was time to meet his people. He walked slowly on the street, not doing anything to attract attention, but making no efforts to blend in. He reached the first building. It was a simple building with different plants and animals drawn and painted all over it, either the work of an untalented artist or a child. He stole a peek inside. He was at a school. The caregiver said something, and all the children started screaming in delight and rushing for the door as she tried to stop them. Some were attempting to use their still growing wings to rush to the open windows while she struggled to settle them down. One managed to get out of her grasp and ran straight into him. He held steady the little girl as he blocked the doorway of their escape. The little girl stared up at him with wide brown eyes. Another boy ran up to him, pulling at his trousers, and Ganon wasn't sure what to do. He hadn't seen a child since the time he was away. These didn't look the slightest bit wary of him. In fact, they were too curious and unabashed as they stared at him with wide, mischievous eyes. "Excuse me, sorry," the caregiver said as she rushed to pull the boy from his leg. "These children, they..." She stopped short. "Pardon me, my prince," she said, giving a low bow. "You know who I am?" Ganon asked. "Of course," she said, placing the boy back on the ground after giving in to his struggle to break free. "You're the Shadow Prince, Prince Ganon. I'm surprised anyone recognized me." "Oh, we all do. Everyone has been expectant of your return." He felt surprised by that. "Why are the children in such a hurry to escape?" he asked, as another one tried flying to grab a hold of his arm. He rewarded her by squatting low so the child could get on his back. "They know lessons are over, and their parents will be here any moment to pick them up." As if on cue, the first set of parents arrived. Ganon turned to the new arrivals as more of them dropped from the sky, while some walked towards the school. For a brief moment, he felt like running away, but with the children around him tugging at him, he didn't want to. At first, all the adults stared at him in disbelief, before one remembered himself and bowed low. Soon they were all bowing and acknowledging him in the chorus of "My Prince." "You're a prince?" the little girl on his back whispered loudly to him. "I suppose I am." "You don't look like a prince," the girl frowned, and Ganon felt his heart drop. He had been gone for too long, far too long. If only he had been stronger. If only... Princes wear crowns. You have to have a crown if you're a prince, the little girl concluded, nodding matter-of-factly at her assessment. Ganon laughed. "I suppose you're right. I'll wear one the next time for your approval." Her mother noticed her then and rushed towards him, apologizing profusely. "It's all right," he told her, shifting the little girl to his chest while she giggled at the awkward movement. The mother, noticing that he didn't seem to mind at all, offered him a smile, and she gave her daughter a stern look before the little girl relented and went into her arms. "I want up too," a boy announced, which had Ganon beaming as his parents rushed forward to get him before he found his way onto Ganon's back. "You've returned," the girl's mother said, unable to keep it to herself. Ganon noticed her eyes were misting over. He was unsure why, but he gave a slight nod that prompted her to form a wide smile on her own. With that, the rest of them grew bolder and came forward, each voicing their own journey at his return. Soon more people showed up, and the streets became crowded with whispers of his return. The stories flowing down the streets, to every shop, every home, and every corner. As people gathered around him, they stretched out their hands to him as if proving to themselves that he was really there. And as he smiled, nodded, and shook their hands, more came, more acknowledged, and more rejoiced. As Ganon stood there with his people, he realized two things. He would do anything he had to do to protect them, and he wanted Nix to see his people.
Beautiful. Thank you for reading that scene. It was lovely. I had to clap it myself too. So, okay. Between Memory of Stone and Verity of Gold, which was the longest to write, and which was the easiest?
Funny answer. Memory of Stone was the longest to write, and it was the easiest to write at the same time. That's because when I started writing, Memory of Stone was with this new doe-eyed experience into writing, and I was just enjoying the process of writing and getting to know these characters. I took a lot of time because I had never published a book before, and I wanted to make sure I did it right. But Verity of Old, while I wrote it faster, especially because a lot of people asked me at the time that they wanted to read the second book, it was difficult to write for different reasons. The first reason is it's a series. It's one thing to write a book, another thing to write a series and make sure all the points of view and the story follows without plot holes. So I was scared that I would mess that up. There's also the fear of the second book not being as good as the first one, especially if it's the same story. Then the last difficulty was I wrote this book during the lockdown and during the times of protest. So my personal experience during that time just challenged me mental health-wise and work-wise. I was doing so much at the same time, always thinking about the struggles we were facing in the country. It just made it impossible to really focus on the book at some points. And at some point when I write a particular scene where there's betrayal or where someone in high authority or something is coming for the lower ones, it reflected too much of reality to me that it was hard to just write this thing from a point of I'm removing myself from the situation. But I still enjoyed the story and I enjoyed writing scenes like the ones I just read, so it was worth it.
Alright, that brings me to my next question. The characters in the book, in book 2, you could see a lot of character development in them, like they grew as characters. Like Nix, I could see like a drastic development in her, like her attitude, the way she settled down to think before acting and all that stuff. Will you say the change happened due to your personal experience or it was meant to happen in the book too?
It was meant to happen, and I would like to hope that as my characters were growing, I was also growing as a person. But it was intentional. The point of writing a story that follows the journey of a character, their life experiences, is to show how these situations and maturity changes their perspective and how they handle situations. I know a lot of people came for me when I read the book one and showed some scenes where Nix, that was known to be the tough girl that could take the nonsense, was showing areas of being stubborn and so many other things. But I wrote it intentionally because this was someone that was coming from she was a big fish in a little pond. And when she was no more that, when her situation changed, obviously we now start seeing the parts where she's weak at. So the two was to show how now she's seen that weakness. What is she doing to change that about herself?
So, which of the characters do you relate to more?
Sadly mixed. Good and bad. The good part is I like that her strength. The bad part is when I was writing the negative part, I was like, yes, do this bad thing. I wasn't thinking anyone was going to say, oh, you also remind me of her. So I wasn't writing her intentionally from anything I'd gone through or how I act to things. But I guess when you focus so much on one character, parts of your personality will rub off, will show through that character. When I read it back after people had told me or remind me of her, I started understanding how I could understand some decisions she made.
Sorry. Do any of you have any questions before I continue? I carry on. Alright. In book 2, there were a lot of revelations, like a lot. Was like, did you have that plan already when you're writing book 1?
Actually, no. Funny thing, thank goodness it's a 3-part series, so book 3, we'll talk about that eventually. Originally, I thought it was going to be a 6 or 7-part series, and what I had in mind, the good and bad person was how Nix handled things, how the relationships were in the book. There were significant differences when I looked back on my notes to how I finished book 1. So even though I had an idea for book 1, halfway, because of the natural progression of how characters acted, some things just wouldn't make sense for these people to do. So that shift caused a different shift in the book 2. So even if I knew what type of story I wanted to write, I kind of went into the book 2 blind.
So that means when you were done with book 1, you know what?
Yes, it was a moment of, I had this great idea, but now I'm done with this first one, and I just have to sit down and think, wow, everything else I wrote is rubbish, so I have to go back to the drawing board and write a new thing.
Let's see. Okay. Let's talk about love interest and friendship.
Okay.
And betrayal.
Okay.
I don't know if I should say this. I don't want it to be a spoiler. I think I'll skip that. Let me not spoil the book for you guys. What can your readers expect next? Like in the next book?
The next book, I'm not actually sure what people took away from the first and second books, what elements were there. I know the fighting scenes were a lot in the 2 books. I know that I didn't really touch on relationships. Like, I didn't go deep into the romance part. Maybe because I'm not that romantic a person, who knows. But I want to show how those relationships grow in the 3rd book, the romantic kinds, the friendship kinds. And just because of the type of story it is, the wars brewing, the politics of the whole thing, I want to explore that aspect of the book too. The political part of it. Don't worry, I will make sure that politics doesn't look boring in that book.
It doesn't in the book, like, so far.
Great. So yes, I want to touch more on the politics, the romance, and if you read the 2 books, maybe more, I'm not sure which one shows more, but I have this thing where I have an element I drop and expand on why it's relevant later. So the final book will be a good opportunity to encompass how everything affects the end result and the decisions they make. So yeah. Plus more fight scenes.
Like you said, more fighting scenes. I actually enjoyed so many fighting scenes, especially Nix and Tulia. Like, there were so many strong female characters in this book. Like, at a point, I didn't even realize that they were male characters because the female characters were so badass, like, epic. Did you have that in mind when writing it? Like, I want these female characters to show more, to be more powerful and strong.
Eventually, yes. My only interest to a female character at first was Nix, because she was the main character. She was the fighting, badass, criminal, smart person. And I had some other female characters I introduced at the beginning, but I thought I was going to make them, I thought their situation would make them weak. But I guess that's a misconception about where people's strengths are. Not every strength is just about fighting. So especially when I went into the character Cicely, that's when I didn't have her in mind for this book at all. She was not a character that was supposed to be written in, but she made it into the book, and next thing I knew, she was one of the characters that stood out to me the most in the book. When I introduced her, from introducing her, I decided to introduce Tulia and decided to improve on what they contributed to the story and where their own strengths lay. So yeah, I did not plan on writing them, but as they're making sense, I really wanted to go deep into how they contributed.
Okay. Now that brings me to Cecil, as you said, you mentioned her. Did you have any difficulty writing about a character that you don't see?
It was tricky to write about a character we didn't see, and I know there's a lot of there's a lot of opinion to readers, viewers about writing a character with anything in terms of a disability that you don't relate to. There's the opinion of why would you write it when you don't understand it, or even though you are going to write it, you're writing from this perspective. Now, I just wanted to make sure that when I was writing, I wasn't thinking about her being blind. I was just thinking of, she's not someone who fights. Where are her strengths? How does she carry herself? That made it easier, I hope, to avoid saying anything that would sound or be wrong. So I did actually go looking for what's the term sensitivity readers. Unfortunately, during the first writing, it wasn't something that was known that much. Yes, I couldn't find someone who would do it. So I had to rely on my experiences, my own views of things, people I have met that are blind, other people reading it and letting me know how they felt about it. But yes, I just felt as long as I focus on who this person is and not just what is this thing that is also there, it wouldn't be that big a problem to overcome.
Okay. So let's talk about the covers. You're really gorgeous, by the way.
Thank you.
What brought the idea for the cover of Variety of Gold?
Variety of Old. So okay, from Memory of Stone cover, funny enough, I chose colors that I wouldn't even use on a normal day for myself.
You like the colors?
I'm more of a purple person, red. What I'm wearing, these are the colors I lean towards. But when I wrote the first book, Memory of Stone, the combination of green and blue kind of felt appropriate for Nix's mood and the scenery, especially Dalferia scenery. So I wanted to make sure I kept that theme throughout the books. So I kept blue in, and the color is kind of like an offset of just how I felt about the book. The design was more of I like abstract, blurry painting kind of books. That's why the background is the way it is. Then the jewelry in front is a pendant that the significance of this will be seen when you read the books. So yes, I went from thinking of the most outrageous cover to thinking of something simple, mostly because it was easier for me to draw at first.
You drew it?
I drew the original covers, yes, then I had a designer who worked on bringing it to this.
That's nice. I'm sorry. Any questions, please?
I've only read the first
First book. Oh, if you have any questions on the first book?
Just look at it. Maybe talk.
Okay. Let's see. Let's talk about Felix and Nix. Okay. Their friendship started as like, okay, if you read the book for the first time, I actually thought Felix and Nix will
End up
together, but why did you decide not to make them end up together? Like, you focus more on the friendship parts.
I actually never thought of the possibility of them ending up together. I wasn't actively trying to make sure they didn't. When I was writing Felix, he was my comfort character. He was, to me, was this ray of sunshine, bubbly personality who looked at things from an optimistic point of view, which is not what I do normally. So it's kind of, this is not who I am. Let me see somebody who is like that. And that is kind of people I want as friends. So it just made sense that this would be the kind of personality that Nix would want as a friend, and he also sort of balanced that out. So yes, I wasn't trying to avoid romance or give a twist to how their relationship went. It just felt like another healthy avenue to explore relationships.
Alright. At what point did you decide you want to write about fake characters?
At the point where I read about them so many times. As I said, I was never really a big fantasy reader. I'd read the book one, and I'd read some fantasy books or dystopian books, but I'd never read about Fae. My only knowledge of Fae early on was Lord of the Rings, the elves. Yes, and that was even to watching the movie and not reading the book. So Fae characters are not characters I was familiar with in that sense. I was only used to hear about elves, sprites, things like that. I didn't know that there was a term for them all. But I really did not want to be the person who was about vampires and werewolves.
Right.
It felt like my teenage life, and that was not who I was when I was writing this book. So I didn't want to go back there. So when I read about Fae, after reading about them in books, I saw different descriptions about their sizes, about their personality, if they're evil or good. But the main thing I saw was these people were vast. They were different gifts, powers, races, or Fae, different ways to describe. Someone could be good, or just like humans, but advanced humans. So that's what these books I read were. So when I read online and researched on what Fae were, it just felt like if I wanted to write about a world with magical beings, that Fae kind of encompassed my idea of magic and having a different lifestyle from humans and territory and everything like that.
Alright, so my final question for you is, do you want to drop a hint for when book 3 will be out? Or have you started writing book 3?
I have started 3. I felt, while I really liked how the book 2 turned out, I felt that I pushed myself way too much. I went, it's right to say write every day, but it don't really mean write a word, like write words every day. I found myself writing at least 3,000 words every single day, Saturdays, Sundays included, not sleeping, wearing myself out. So for the final book, I want to treat myself right, one, and I want to make sure that since it's in the conclusion, the story has more to offer. You see bigger of everything, and the conclusion makes sense, and I don't think it's something I should rush. I would, however, still put it out there on time. Hopefully it's because it's on time, because I know series usually release 1-2 years. Yes, so I would still release it within that fairly early time frame. I just wouldn't rush it as quickly as I did Variety of Old, but I started working on it.
Okay. Thank you for answering my questions. Okay.
I just wanted to know, right? The book, is it as a result of bits and pieces of what you have read before, or is something you just sat down, like did your previous books shape the way you read this ones?
The previous I read or previous.
Yeah.
Okay.
Previous books you read.
So I believe that you can't isolate yourself from information when you're creating anything. So there's probably there's some, like the multiple points of view. My idea for that was because of I read Lee Bardugo's 6 of Prose. I liked most, that's where I started experiencing multiple points of view, and I knew I wanted to do that. Also, I really like daggers, and I read about daggers in books so many times. It just felt like a weapon someone's used to. So that influenced it. But the story itself, what I do is when I'm writing, I avoid reading during that moment of writing my first draft. That way, I would feel safe from influencing my book by someone else's work to that degree, and just write it from how I feel about the characters and what their journey makes sense to be.
Okay, any other questions, please? Anyone?
Your
Okay.
favorite author, please. Your favorite author. Don't worry, if you can't pick one,
I can pick one. I can pick her because I talk about her all the time. I see her speaking Portugal. I love her style of writing so much. Although now I'm like favoring other characters as much, like V.E. Schwab and so many other fantasy writers. But Lee Portugal was the one who started this journey for me as a someone interested in fantasy, and she just stuck since then.
I agree.
We've not read the books yet.
Okay.
We want to buy them if she wants to read them now. I have a question. It's a fantasy, right?
Yes.
So now I see this beautiful car. It's so lovely. But I was imagining it will be like fantasy based, very like African. I was hoping there would be like people from like Wakanda. You know? How come she's white?
So when I was writing the book, I wasn't thinking of where they should be from. It was just
So where are they from?
honestly they are not
Just
from anywhere.
fantasy.
It's a new world. It's not based on any location. I just create the sceneries, the description is not based on any place I had been or read about. It was just based on feeling for what made sense for the characters. So there are characters of different, I don't want to say races because it's not based on our world, but different books and walks of life, different everything. So if you read the full book, you'll see different descriptions of what the characters look like, from humans to fae, from their colors to their sizes to everything.
Yes, I was going to ask, I know that I don't have the privilege of reading the second book, but when I first read the first, it seemed a bit open-ended. So how does that dovetail? How does the second book connect to the first?
So if you start reading the second book, immediately I just dive into a lot of reviews, a lot of action, a lot of stories. So how the first one ends, you can pick it up quickly from the second chapter of the two. And even if it's a series deserve a type of cliffhanger, I made sure that this second book, even if there are big reveals at the end, the main question that was asked was answered.
That is the point. In other words, because I had a curious point, it was not explored in the first book, that since to say no spoilers, I mean, the watchers have not had the opportunity to read it, but there's some mystery about the first book. I was hoping that it was not answered. It was until I knew about the second book that I felt it was unexplored, or like so in a way the mysteries that were still open-ended in the first, you would say were answered in the second.
Yes.
Okay.
What is the first? You should read.
Memory of Stone is the first.
Alright. Thank you everyone. Okay, we have one more question.
Hi.
Hello.
Sorry, I haven't I'm actually just here by chance, but I think it's been very well.
Thank you.
Expressed yourself really well, so that's really great. I want to know what shaped your writing? Did you read a lot as a child? Had you always wanted to be a writer, or is it just something?
Since I was little, I don't know how old, probably nursery school, who knows? I've been writing. I didn't think I wanted to be an author, but I knew I wanted to be a writer. I've read so many books, except only recently I started reading fantasy. But as a child, I read a lot of horror, law, crime stories, mystery stories, life, contemporary romance. And I absorbed so many books, from books written in the country to books written outside, and I started writing my own books as a child.
Alright. Any other questions? Okay.
Okay, just a bit personal one. You guys take reading and writing coach, the most influence with parents, school.
You know, I'll have to think back on my whole life to know the influence, but I realized very early on that the way I saw the world wasn't the same way other people saw the world. It wasn't because I was seeking to look at things differently. I just my brain just works differently in that aspect. So talking now is a new thing for me. I could always express myself then through drawing or writing. So that was it. I don't really know. It's just how I've been since I was a child.
All right. Thank you for the questions. Any other question? All right. I hope you all have your copies. Get it signed today because it's here and. All right, get it signed. Okay. Chio, thank you for having us, for answering our questions.
Thank you for asking them and thank you for coming.
All right. So where's your pen? Let's get to sign in. All right. So thank you, everyone.